Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachot, page 40a, top of the page. Tanu Rabbanan, Tzedin Betzitzis, B'Shamai Poitrin Misil Mechayvin, Ve'aloche Kedivrei Beis Hillel. The sages taught in a Braita with regard to ritual fringes and a linen cloak. Beit Shammai deemed the cloak exempt from ritual fringes due to the fact that sky blue strings must be made from wool, and there is a Torah prohibition against wearing a mixture of wool and linen. Beit Hillel deemed the linen cloak obligated in the midst of ritual fringes, and the halacha is in accordance with the statement of Beit Hillel. Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Tzadok, ve'alo kol hametin tzechet Yerushalayim, eino ela minha mishami mas mihin. Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Tzadok says, but is it not the case that anyone who affixes sky blue strings to a linen cloak in Jerusalem is considered nothing other than one of those who causes others to be astonished at their behavior, as it appears that he is violating the prohibition against wearing a garment containing wool and linen? Amar Rabbi, imkein lama asuha lefi she'ein bekin. The Braita continues, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, if so, that the halacha is in accordance with Beit Hillel, and a linen cloak is required to have ritual fringes, why did the sages prohibit attaching ritual fringes to linen garments in Jerusalem? It is because people are not well versed in the halacha and might ultimately wear garments of wool and linen even when it is not necessary for the mitzvah of ritual fringes. Amale Rava Barav Chana Rava Verimo be'asro v'nipku l'shuka u'parsimo milso kol sheken demas mehu ilaven. Rava bar Rav Chana said to Rava, if that is a concern, then let 10 people take linen cloaks with ritual fringes and go out to the marketplace and thereby publicize the matter, that it is permitted to affix wool strings to linen garment due to the mitzvah. Rava answered, all the more so people would be astonished at us for acting in such an unconventional manner. The Gemara suggests that the rabbis teach during their public lecture that affixing wool strings to a linen garment is permitted for the mitzvah of ritual fringes. The Gemara answers, wearing strings on a linen garment is prohibited because of a rabbinic decree due to the concern that people might use strings that were dyed blue with indigo, with kala ilan, instead of with techelet, with sky blue produced from the chelazon, see 44b, in which case they would not fulfill the mitzvah of ritual fringes and would violate the prohibition against wearing garments containing wool and linen. The Gemara suggests, even if one's blue strings are not dyed with techelet, as required for the mitzvah, let them be considered merely as white strings. In the absence of techelet, one fulfills the mitzvah of white strings, and therefore it should be permitted to affix white woolen strings to a linen garment. The Gemara explains, since it is possible to affix white strings that are of the same type of material as the garment, being linen, and thereby fulfill the mitzvah without overriding the prohibition against wearing a garment made from wool and linen, one may not affix white wool strings to a linen garment. K'deresh Lakish. De'amar Reish Lakish, kol makom she'ata moitzeh aseh v'lo yisaseh, im ata yachol likayim et shneihem mutar, im lav yavo aseh v'yidche et lo yisaseh. The Gemara notes that this is in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, any place where you find a positive mitzvah and a prohibition that clash with each other, if you are able to fulfill both of them, that is preferable. If not, and if that is not possible, the positive mitzvah shall come and override the prohibition. In this case, the clash between the mitzvah of ritual fringes and the prohibition against wearing a garment that contains wool linen. One can fulfill both of them by using white strings that are linen instead of wool, if the garment is made from linen. The Gemara suggests, let them test the strings to ascertain whether they are dyed with indigo or with techelet. as explained by the Gemara in 42b. The Gemara responds, rather, the prohibition against affixing ritual fringes to a linen garment is a rabbinic decree due to the concern that perhaps the sky blue strings were colored with techelet dye that had been used for testing the color of the dye in the vat and therefore became unfit. See 42b. In such a case, there would be no fulfillment of the mitzvah of sky blue ritual fringes to override the prohibition against wearing a garment of wool and linen. Turning to 40b now. The Gemara suggests that the sages write letters informing dye producers that techelet that was used for testing the color of the dye in the vat is unfit for ritual fringes. The Gemara explains, shall we go and rely on letters, assuming that dye producers will follow the instructions they contain? Rav responded to this and said, now 40b, top of the page, with regards to the prohibitions against eating leavened bread on Passover and eating on Yom Kippur, which are punishable by karet, we rely on letters sent from the rabbinical court in Eretz Yisrael publicizing whether the year was declared a leap year and when they have declared the new moon. Here, with regard to the mitzvah of ritual fringes, which is merely a positive mitzvah, and there's no kares involved, is it not all the more so correct that letters can be relied upon? Okay, we'll stop there and pick it up at the next Amud. You know what we could do? We could actually just continue on the whole thing. It's been so short that we can just continue. Let's just do a one. It's been a while since I've done a whole daf, but you know what? Let's just start here. Let's just do it. So we're on 40b, right? So El Amarava Hamil Samri Vitmar Hamil Samri Vitmar Mara Mishum der Bezer Kavasi. Shemin Garvasadin and Visoich Shalish the Espereno. Rava said, this is a statement that I said, and it was stated in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, in the name of Rabbi Zera, in accordance with my opinion. The reason for the rabbinic decree is lest one's cloak rip within 3 finger breadths of the edge of the corner of the garment, which is where the ritual fringes are placed, and he sew it with the linen string and then use the excess string for ritual fringes. And in such a case, the ritual fringes would be unfit because the Torah states, you shall prepare twisted cords. Deuteronomy 22:12, which teaches prepare it and not from what has already been prepared. Consequently, the strings must be attached to the garment for the sake of the mitzvah of ritual fringes. When the individual places the linen string there in order to stitch the garment and then decides to use it for the mitzvah of ritual fringes and adds sky blue wool strings, he does not fulfill the mitzvah of ritual fringes and violates the prohibition against wearing a garment of wool and linen. Because this rabbinic decree, Rabbi Zera untied the ritual fringes and removed them from his linen cloak. Rabbi Zera said, the rabbinic decree prohibiting ritual fringes on a linen garment is also due to the concern that one might affix ritual fringes to a nighttime garment. Since the mitzvah of ritual fringes does not apply in that case, if one wears the garment, he would not fulfill the mitzvah and would violate the prohibition against wearing a garment with wool and linen. He shall beged Peturo. My time beged beinon. And Rava said, this is a statement that I said. And it was stated in the west, in Eretz Yisrael, in the name of Hamizeo. And according to my opinion, if the garment is made from cloth and its corners is made from leather, it is required to have ritual fringes. Conversely, if a cloak is made from leather and its corners are made from cloth, it is exempt from the mitzvah of ritual fringes. What is the reason for this? We require that the main part of the garment is be obligated, and a leather garment is not required to have ritual fringes. Achai azil bisar kanaf. The Gemara notes if Achai would follow the corner in determining whether the garment is required to have ritual fringes or not, because the Torah states on the corners of the garments, Numbers 15:38. Okay. Amar Rave, Amar Rav Tzchoir, Amar Rav Huna. Heiti libalas shaloish. Rava says, the Rav Tzchoir says, the Rav Huna says, in a case where one affixed ritual fringes to a garment possessing only 3 corners, which is not required to have ritual fringes, and then completed its 4th corner by sewing on additional material or cutting away some material, the ritual fringes he attached to the original 3 corners are unfit. This is due to the principle prepare it, and not from what has already been prepared. Once the garment is required to have ritual fringes, one may attach to the ritual fringes. The strings that were attached before the garment was required to have them are not fit. Kevin Chipatsu ba Sholosh Hayu Matina Trenes. The Gemara raises an objection from a Braita. It is told of the early generations of pious men that once they weaved 3 finger breadths of the length of the garment, they would affix the white and blue strings to the first 2 corners, even though the garment was not yet long enough to be obligated to have ritual fringes. The Gemara answers, say that the Braita should read as follows. Once they completed the garment, until there were only 3 finger breadths left to weave, they would affix the white and sky blue strings to the first 2 corners, not all of them. Okay. Ini, it's in parentheses. Ini, the Gemara asks, and do we say prepare it, and not from what has already been prepared? Is that so that the principle disqualifies ritual fringes that one affixed to a garment before he was required to do so? But doesn't Rabbi Zera say that if one affixed ritual fringes to a garment that already had ritual fringes affixed to it, and then removed the original strings, it is fit despite the fact that when he attached the second set, they were superfluous? This indicates that even if one attaches ritual fringes to a garment, when there is no obligation to attach them, the ritual fringes are fit. Amar Rava hashta bibalto sifkai ma'aseloi havi. Rava said this does not present a difficulty because now that he adds a second unnecessary set of ritual fringes and is liable for violating the prohibition of adding to a mitzvah baltosif, see Deuteronomy 13:1, is it not considered as an action? Maskevla papa. Mimai digavin oisvi kom mikavin. Dil milavatole kom mikavin baltois vileka maseiko. Rav Papa objects to this. From where is it known that Rabbi Zera is discussing a case where the person intended to add to the original set of ritual fringes? Perhaps Rabbi Zera is discussing a case where he intended to nullify the original strings, and therefore there is no prohibition of adding to a mitzvah. And there is an action. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Masna, Amar Shmuel. Tcheles ein ba mishum kelaim ve'afilu b'talis pituro. With regard to the issue of fixing ritual fringes to a garment that already has ritual fringes, the Gemara relates, Rabbi Zera says that Rav Masna says that Shmuel says white and sky blue strings are not subject to the prohibition of diverse kinds, And this is halacha even if they are affixed to a cloak that is exempt from ritual fringes. My talis betuho ilemede lo shu vetanyo talis shekoton miskase bo shivuboi. Okay, it's the end, so we'll stop here. But just to translate that, the Gemara asks, what is meant by a cloak that is exempt from ritual fringes? If we say that it is referring to a cloak that is not of the size necessary to require the affixing of ritual fringes, that is difficult. But isn't it Tana Brayta with regard to a cloak that is large enough for a minor to cover his head and most of his body with it? We'll pick it up on next daf. B'ezras Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.